How's everybody today?
Doing well, thanks. After lunch?
I'm John Cummings, and I went to Loyola. And we used to have a great competition where, in front of my school, we had Almighty God there, and the boys would come over and put braziers on Jesus' hand. But there's always been a great competition between the schools. But I want to confess to you that I fell in love with a Tulane student. I'm 81 years old, so there's no me too over here. But she was not only a beautiful girl, but she was a freshman, and she was first in the class. And so we did fine, but she eventually, unfortunately, was involved with cocaine and things like that. And the dean called her in and told her it would probably be better if she dropped out rather than fail. And so she did, and she moved in with a supplier, and she had 2 children with her. Went to jail for 3 months. Now, the reason I know that is because when I was a senior in law school, she called and told me all of this and wanted to know if I would have a cup of coffee with her, and I said I would, but it had to be at the Loyola cafeteria. So we were there, and I was talking to her, and all of a sudden, all of those old feelings started to come back. And I told myself, I've got to stop it right now, because eventually I would have to take her home to my family and tell them that she went to Tulane.
Folks are just coming in. You are in the right room, I promise. This is despite the stand-up comedy. We'll get started. So today you're getting 4 speakers for what you thought was 3. And we, unfortunately, Reverend Edwards couldn't join us last minute. But we got Mr. Attorney John Cummings and Pat Bryant. And Pat Bryant and General Honore are on their way. And so I may be stepping out every few minutes to take a call.
We'll tell you, Megan, we see them down the hall here.
You see him?
I said, we'll tell you. Okay.
Oh, great. Then shuttle them in here. Dr. Laska will be our escort. So the agenda, so we'll get started. We'll go through the speakers in order. It'll be Lisa Jordan, and then Attorney Lisa Jordan, John Cummings, Pat Bryant, and then Lieutenant General Honore. They will each speak for 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up to discussion. And this was their choice. They wanted to spend as little time speaking and really entertaining more of the questions and saving more of the time for discussion. So think about your questions as you go through, because we really want to save as much time for that as possible. And so we'll start with Professor Lisa Jordan, is the director of the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic, a native New Orleanian, and a Loyola and Tulane law grad. Professor Jordan began her legal career as a prosecutor in Orleans Parish and then moved to the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic as a supervising attorney. In case you didn't catch that, she's now our director of the law clinic. Less than a year after she began her career as a clinic attorney in 1996, she became lead attorney for the clinic's representation of a citizen group called the St. James Citizens for Jobs and the Environment, and its regional and national partners in their fight against the location of the Shintech polyvinyl chloride complex in the environmental justice community in Convent, Louisiana. Oh, General Honore. Yep. You get to sit wherever you want.
Don't come over here. The only reason I want to sit next to you is because when the FBI pictures come out, I'm in.
Keep these guys in. The clinic's work on the community's behalf earned its awards and depictions in TV movies, as private interests in Louisiana mounted a campaign to deny similar representation to future EJ communities by shutting down the clinic and draining the Louisiana student practice rule of NET. So this was in the late 1990s. Through the efforts of many, those attempts failed. And Lisa Jordan.
Yay! All right.
Hi, everybody. Good to see y'all. So y'all are here to hear about environmental and climate justice, and hopefully, as May said, to share some of y'all's thoughts about those topics. It would be helpful, I think, for the panelists for us to get an idea of where y'all are coming from background-wise. So how many people in the audience are lawyers, licensed lawyers? Okay. How many of y'all are law students? Oh, wow, okay. And how many of y'all are not lawyers or law students? Okay, wow, all right, so a good mixture of people here. So my perspective on this panel is basically, as a Tulane Environmental Law Clinic attorney now for over 20 years, representing environmental justice communities before state and federal agencies, and mostly what I want to focus on is in the courts and the challenges to successful representation of citizens in the courts for environmental justice issues. And so when I talk about environmental justice, and I guess it can mean different things, but I'm really talking about the rights of low-income and minority communities not to be disproportionately affected by pollution or really any negative environmental impacts. And so you saw that the name of this panel is Climate Justice as well, and I thought it would be interesting to talk more later about what is climate justice, and is how does that relate to environmental justice as we're used to talking about it, and can there be a disproportionate impact when you're talking about climate justice, or is climate change the great equalizer? So I think it's important just when we're sort of thinking about that, because that's a relatively new topic, right? But we've got decades of history on environmental justice and environmental justice communities and the challenges that they face. So I thought it would sort of make sense to talk about that first and know that it kind of goes beyond that, beyond just the substance of environmental justice to process issues. And that's what I really want to focus on. So environmental injustice is very much still a reality in Louisiana, New Orleans, and Louisiana, and really across the country. Even though the Shintech case that May referenced and that the clinic worked on years ago was, ended like in 1998, not all that much, unfortunately, has changed as far as the impacts on fence line communities of pollution. So I provided in the CLE materials, I thought I'd kind of give you from the three branches of government. So you've got information from the legislative branch, which is essentially Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. That's really the law as far as environmental justice is concerned, but environmental justice goes beyond just Title VI, and it goes into federal agencies' issues. So I also provided you information from EPA, which is the major federal agency that's going to be in charge of looking into environmental justice concerns. And I gave you all the executive order that President Clinton entered in, I guess it was 1994, directing all federal agencies to review their programs and determine and try to implement environmental justice perspectives. And that executive order, if you notice, discusses both low-income and minority communities. Title VI is restricted to discrimination on the basis of race, religion, national origin. So EPA took that executive order and tried to implement some programs. I provided y'all a fairly long document that EPA produced, which goes through all of the programs that EPA administers, and you'll see in that document it's pretty much every environmental statute. It discusses the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, RCRA, CERCLA, so we're talking about solid waste, hazardous waste. It went through NEPA, many of y'all are familiar with the National Environmental Policy Act, and it was EPA basically reviewing all its programs to see where and how it could implement environmental justice. And so that's what I provided you basically from the executive branch, but I really wanted to focus on what we do at the clinic, which is mostly the judicial branch, though we do of course appear before federal and state agencies. But I wanted to talk about that because I think it's really important. So I gave you some decisions. The South Camden decision I provided to y'all, which is basically the decision. Well, let me back up a second. The EPA Title VI regulations that I provided to you was the regulations that EPA produced to implement environmental justice. And what's important about those regulations is that under EPA's programs, it references environmental justice as not just discriminatory intent, but discriminatory impact. So EPA can act when there's discriminatory impact, even if there's no evidence of discriminatory intent, which is pretty important. And citizens, when initially got excited about being able to enforce those provisions that only require a showing of discriminatory effect, until basically the courts told citizens that they cannot privately enforce those regulations through either 1983 or through the Civil Rights Act. So that's up to EPA now, and not all that much has been done on that. So that's why the courts are important. And I thought, just how important is access to the courts in this? We frequently tell our clients when we're representing them, don't just count on the judicial angle. Push your politics, push your representatives. But in the end, in a state like Louisiana especially, that might not get the citizens very far. So access to the courts is crucial. And I thought, I'd use some words from some of the citizens that we represented way back in the Shintech days to sort of explain how important representation and access to the courts is. This is in the frontline piece. Gloria Braxton was one of the community members, and she said, "We don't have no money to pay lawyers. These people did a tremendous job for us, and I love them. I love them." Pat Malasaw said, "We hoped that at least we could get a fair hearing in the courts, that at least the judicial branch of government would be open to us, and we'd have equal access to the laws and the protections in the law. But instead of that happening, they're giving all the protections to multinational corporations, and the citizens are being shut out." So that was a long time ago, and the clinic's still able to represent communities, but those restrictions that the citizens talked about are still there in the law. And that's kind of what I want to talk about is how are they there? What's restricting citizens, especially low-income environmental justice citizens, from having equal access to the courts? And I thought I'd talk about sort of a few of the laws that we deal with on a regular basis at the clinic that makes it hard for citizens environmental justice communities in particular, to go forward. That's okay. The laws, if you read them, and I provided a few of them at the end of the materials I gave you, if you read them, they don't appear to be directed toward restricting certain communities more than others, but in practice they do. So they do it by restricting timing issues, restricting information, restricting venues, and restricting processes. And so I thought I would talk about that a little bit. As far as the restricted timing issues, this comes in and we're talking about mostly cases challenging state agencies who issue permits for new facilities that pollute air, water, land, or for facilities that are already there and want to expand. This is a lot of what we do at the clinic, and this is the reality that citizens face. The state agencies are supposed to be the public trustee of the environment for the citizens, and you pretty much, as a citizen, all of us, have to rely on those agencies to do their job. And when they don't, we have to rely on the ability to take them to court. But what you end up with restricted timing-wise is very, very restrictive time periods for going forward in court and even for commenting to the agency. So most of the time, citizens find out about something that's coming to their community because there's a public notice issued. And once that public notice issues, it's usually only 30 days that citizens have to comment on that proposal. Not a lot of time. And when you're talking about an air permit, you're talking about volumes of extremely complicated information that most citizens can't process and certainly can't process in 30 days. So that makes it difficult, the restricted timing issue of how long you have to comment. And then once the agency issues a decision that the citizen doesn't like, that will permit the pollution to go into their community, then in the state of Louisiana, they have 30 days to file a suit. So to find a lawyer to represent them and to put together a petition and file suit. That's all the time that you have, and the laws have been interpreted very, very restrictively. Judges are not inclined to look beyond those. So that makes it really difficult. The information that's restricted is basically, as I said, sure, in the state, you'll get volumes and volumes of information that a citizen will have access to. But how is a citizen going to understand that information? The agencies hold public hearings, and you'd think this is a great way for citizens to learn about the processes, about what's going to happen. But the agencies don't answer questions at the public hearings. All they do is sit there and they listen to the people. No information comes back. So I'm going to wind up here, but mostly what I want to talk about, too, is the restricted venues and what happens when you go to court. Basically, most cases, even wherever it is that the facility is, you're going to end up probably having to litigate that case in Baton Rouge. So the citizens will not be in front of a judge that they elected. They will not be in front of a judge generally who knows the area, and they will not be in front of a judge who will be easily accessible to them. So can they attend court hearings? Can they do all those things that everybody else can do? Probably not. And the bottom line is, again, all these laws are written so that on their face they look like they equally affect everyone. But when you have money and when you have resources, you can make those quick timings. You can hire that lawyer. You can hire that expert. You can do those things. But when you don't have access to those resources, that's when these laws become really restrictive and prevent access to the courts. Thank you all.
We front-loaded the legal speakers, actually, so they're both attorneys. They'll go first. So second is Attorney John Cummings. Although I was told 2 housekeeping reminders. One is to sign in. The red is for folks looking for CLE credits, and the white sheet is for other participants. And then for our speakers, just a reminder, the first time. Telling you this. The yellow.
We can do 5 minutes.
Yeah. The yellow is.
Let's do 5 minutes.
It is in fact 5 minutes now. Okay. So our student will raise the yellow sign for the 5-minute warning, and the red sign is a hard stop. So next we have Attorney John Cummings III. Mr. Cummings had a successful national legal practice with offices in New Orleans, Seattle, Philadelphia that handled mass tort. He was lead counsel on numerous high-profile cases, including a DuPont plastic case in Puerto Rico, the Pan Am aircraft case, and others with settlements of up to $6 billion. Billion, yeah. And John agreed to stay behind if any of our law students would like to learn more about how to become a millionaire lawyer.
Others are invited.
Others are invited. John built the Whitney Plantation. Some of you may have heard of it. The Whitney Plantation is a museum in St. John the Baptist Parish. It's the only slavery museum in the United States. He is married with 8 children. He retired from legal practice 3 years ago. And whatever the bartender and Uncle Sam let him keep, he invested in real estate. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Ordinarily do not attend lectures that would have me as a speaker. One of my favorite people was Cecil Lumpkin. He was a Christian preacher, and he was very successful. And he didn't fit any mold, but he had a large congregation in McNeil, Mississippi. And he used to fish with him, and he always would cheat fishing, But he said that his secret was his sermons. He said, I tell them what I'm going to tell them, and then tell them what I told them. That's what I have to do now. I got 10 minutes, okay? I'll stay behind, and I'll give you bullet points. If you want to find out about any of them, I'll be glad to talk to you. My wife, some years ago, had a business card printed and distributed to everybody who I associated with. It only has 2 words, General, stop talking. So they'd walk behind a crowd and just hold it up, and that was Tom. So I'm looking for that red. Is it the red? Yeah.
The yellow is 5 minutes red.
Here's a story. On the river, the Mississippi River, and I urge all the lawyers here to form a Mississippi law firm, so that you will handle one factory at a time, and there's tremendous opportunities there. And don't be afraid of big corporations. I never have. When you think you're right, jump and do it. I've always found a safety net somehow comes up and saves you. Danka DuPont, they produce a neoprene, which is a false rubber that was used in the Second World War to make tires because our rubber supply was cut off by German submarines. And it has a chemical in it, chloroprene, and chloroprene is a likely carcinogen. It's been tested and retested. There was a study made in 2010 by EPA using IRIS, and I'll be glad to talk to you about that. That's a part of a testing to arrive at acceptable limits of emission. Part of that study was an animal study. They would put 50 rats, male and female, 50 mice, male and female, and put them in a confined area and give them a dosage of chloroprene on a regular basis, and then would, from time to time, extract one and dispatch it and have an autopsy to find out what's in it. And here's what they found. They found tremendous numbers of liver cancer, lung cancer, throat cancer, bladder, in the little female mice, breast cancer. And so that, together with, you can't equate an animal test to us because we haven't been tested. And the only real test on a human, because it would be unheard of to pull out someone and kill them and dissect them. But wherever there was a death because of chloroprene and there was an autopsy, that's very valuable. We've studied all of that. Now, this study sets 0.2 micrograms per cubic liter. And the ideal is 0.002. They believe that you could live a normal life 70 years if you breathed 0.2 for that time. In this particular case, we have the EPA came in because they were alarmed at chloroprene because they'd gotten this data that said it was very, very bad. They wondered where chloroprene was. They found it in Louisiana and found that the five districts that produced the most potential for cancer in the United States were all in St. John the Baptist Parish. All in St. John the Baptist Parish. Tough with politics. Came in and they said, well, it's no health problem. No health problem. Because look, we watched the cancer registry very closely, and there's no more cancers here than there, and all that business. 2017, the legislature changed it. You can't use a parish, including all of its marshes, in order to make that. You must do it by census districts. And census districts look like this. Here is St. John the Baptist Parish. This is the Danka plant. This is Census District 708. A little bit of the plant hangs out here in 709. Now, EPA says that in 708, rather than having an acceptable rate of one cancer per million, or maybe 10, in 708 it's predicted that you will have 840. In 709, 660. And this area got all of our attention Because all of the public bodies were saying they were invoking the doctrine of no, there's no health problem here. We have been talking to DEQ, and they say, don't worry, no problem. Head of DEQ came, is that 5 minutes? Better talk. You ever see those ads where they say, but afterwards, let's sit and talk. I've got plenty to say. So what we did, we took on DEQ. And we believe that there's something very wrong there. And we'll find out what it is. We don't have it right yet, but we're not going to go away. I reminded the head of DEQ and handed him the seven indictments in Flint, Michigan. And the number one was the head of DEQ there was indicted for some things, but also for misleading the public. And this organization appeared 5 times on film, saying there's no, at one time before a school board, DEQ stood up there, and over here was a citizens group with .2 on red shirts, .2 and that's it, talking to their elected officials. And DEQ says, don't listen to this. .2 is too low, it's going to be changed. And all of these people are fearmongers. This is from the mouth of a man who took an oath that he would protect their health, the fearmongers. So what did we do? I'm going to be finished in 4 minutes. EPA went in and they took snatch tests to see what the air was in here, and it was so alarming that it required a monitor, air monitor here, right behind the plant. At the 5th Ward School, 500 kids, elementary school, Chad Baker, and one up here at Ashna Hospital where you go to get healed, and the high school. And not one of them had a healthy reading. Sometimes it was 500 times. And these little, and chloroprene is heavier than air. So you can imagine a big ugly guy like me and then a kid this big. And they would be exposed to it more. So, come on in, free. No extra charge.
Where's the popcorn?
Except you have to sit next to him. So, here's what we did. We decided to discover if these, what happens when you breathe this. So we took, at just random, 18 urine samples. People that just came in and volunteered. 2 of them were from the 5th Ward School. Everyone positive. Every one of them were positives. We went back and took 12 and selected areas here, right up at the interstate. Over here, all of them were positive. We just finished taking 30 more yesterday. In their urine, they found chloroprene metabolites. People who have taken chemistry know that once it goes, it changes. You won't find chloroprene, but you'll find these metabolites that are generated only by chloroprene. It's a marker. If it's there, you have chloroprene. Every kid has it. Every one of them. Our expert, one final point here before they get the hook out on me. EPA made Denka, not us, Denka, to draw an isoplat. Electronically create a line, a circle around your plant and mark it so that we'll know how far out you must go in order to breathe safe air. Here it is, guys. Look at it. Takes in all over Plas. Look, even the marshes here. Takes in part of St. Charles Parish. St. Charles Parish. Here and then back in Edgard. 41,000 people. We've spent almost $300,000 on experts, and they're all available to you, gentlemen. And one says, world class, that we will find that everyone here has chloroprene metabolites in their bodies. he's not a communist, but he's holding up the red. So I tell you what, I want to thank you, and I'm going to be here. And if you have any questions, and if you want to know how to form you're all young, how to form a law firm that will deal with these people. And remember that you people have the power to bring them all to their knees, all of them.
That's right.
And I'll be available.
You mentioned Edgar. Edgar is where the Whitney plantation is located. That's right.
That's how I met them. They came, these people are descendants of slaves. They have no power, none. They call fear money. You just discard those black people. General Honore's been fighting it for a long time. It's the same thing, St. James Parish, and we just have to put a stop to it. That's it. And so if you're passionate and you're smart, and you can either have money or you can find somebody with money who's dedicated, and you can get funds, grants for this type of thing, we can add to our legacy that we stopped all of this.
And Denko was formerly owned by DuPont, which you had taken on in Puerto Rico. So they know you.
My friend Rob Billiard, who I think is going to join us, he's from Cincinnati, and he handled a case recently that you read about where the DuPont and 3M were producing the product that went into Teflon, and it was causing cancer. He just settled it for 3,500 plaintiffs for $672 million, Rob Billiard. Be glad to bring him one time and discuss that.
So you have the public interest legal perspective and the regulatory advocacy, the private interest, lawyering part of it, and now our next speaker, Mr. Pat Bryant. Mr. Pat Bryant is an organizer, an activist, a writer, and an urban planner. We had a conversation, and I come up with these bios, by the way, so this is what I think of Mr. Pat Bryant. And he received his degree in urban planning from the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. He has been involved in the civil rights movement for over 60 years and arrested 69 times for speaking out against injustices, including environmental injustice. Previously, Mr. Pat Bryant was the organizer of the Gulf Coast Tenants Organization that worked across Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. And he is currently the co-moderator for Justice and Beyond. It's a coalition of over 3,500 leaders across the greater New Orleans area. Mr. Bryant is married to Judge Claire Jupiter, and together they have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. And thank you so much for joining us today. Just a reminder, you're going to see some colors. The yellow is 5 minutes, and the red is a hard stop.
I won't see the yellow. Man is short. Good evening, and I'm a little tired. For the last 12 hours, I've been trying to get out of the hospital. And I just went in to get checked out. I thought I might be having a stroke. I had all the symptoms, but when they went through all of that, I found out that I didn't. And I'm happy that I said, I've been trying to get checked out since about 10 o'clock this morning. And I said, look, I just got to go over to Tulane for a minute. Get me out of here. But so my energies have been working to be free of a hospital. But I'm glad to be here today because this is a issue that's near and dear to me. Back in the 70s and 80s, I was organizing tenant unions all across the country. And people constantly asked, we'd win against landlords. I knew, how to beat the landlords in common law states. I knew how to beat the landlords here. And we trained people. We trained people to be what we call barefoot lawyers, going into court, whipping the landlords, organizing thoroughly in their communities, turning out. We had 5 big Greyhound buses. And we could put 250 people on any spot in the South in a matter of 12 hours. That was power. That built a movement. And that movement became the environmental justice movement. From down in Louisiana, we excited people because they, around these chemical plants, people were easy to organize. We go to them and we tell them, this is right after the right to know. We tell them what the chemicals were coming out of those plants, what those chemicals would do to them. We'd excite them, get them organized, and they would be on a bus pretty soon to someplace. And they would meet other people like themselves. And that movement kept building and excited people around the country. And we linked up with them. We linked up with the Native Americans. We linked up with the Latinos. We linked up with people, with poor white people, and made the demand that these companies that were operating in our communities stop. And the environmental justice movement sprang up, began. And we had a summit, had a couple of summits. The largest environmental gathering ever in this country was held right here in New Orleans. And it was an environmental justice summit. And we came out of those with some truths. We had 2 summits. And we came out of them with truths that spoke to the poisoning of the country in places where people of color live and how it had to stop. We failed to get down to the hard nut of racism and white privilege. While people were put on notice that we wanted this poisoning to stop, I mean, we were down in St. James and St. John, organized around, we stopped the Whitney, the Formosa plant that was going to be at Whitney Plantation. We stopped it dead in its tracks. And we stopped a bunch of others, and some got through. But the key ingredient in all of that was there was no concern for the people who lived there. They were not human beings. They were less human than others. And that's the key to this thing. If we can deal with white supremacy, a germ, a virus that spreads like hell, people are taught, people get white supremacy from the mother's milk almost. Little white kids see a black guy and run. So bad that my wife was being approached one day by a kind of big black guy on the street. She grabbed a purse, became very frightened, turned out to be her son. I mean, we have stigmatized black people so much, so badly. Robbers, cheats, you name it. We blame the victim for all of the ills of society. And that's hard to undo. This week, I lost a great battle, lost round one of a great battle. A battle to stop Entergy from building a plant that would poison people in New Orleans East. That was round one. Because we're asking a larger question now. Who should own? Who should be the owner of the electric service to New Orleans? Not many years ago, we provided our own energy, our own electricity. We didn't rob us. We didn't cheat us. It provided a great retirement plan for its workers. It was a great thing. And somehow we bought into the notion that private industry could do it better. And somehow they put enough money out to convince us that this would be a great thing to do. Let private industry provide us our utilities. And before the ink was cold, the private industry said, we're going to go down here in Kelowna and we're going to build a nuclear plant. And guess who lived in Kelowna? Anybody? Guess who lived in Kelowna? Black people. And because it wasn't happening to most of us, just some poor black folk over there, nobody but those black folk rose up to fight it. As long as racism, white supremacy is alive and well, there's going to be no safe place for the polluters. I mean, there will be, every place will be safe for polluters. Every place will be safe for poison industry. So if the notion that I'm putting out is if we want to save the earth, we must save all of its people from the exploitation that's occurring today. Africa is being raped. Asia is being raped. Central and South America raped by very respectable companies. If we want a different world, then we've got to ask some critical questions about who's developing what for whom. Who is developing what for whom? Racism is only a few hundred years old. 500 years to be exact. The myth of white supremacy has to be unlearned and erased from society. What do I mean by that? We have to begin in small groups discussing what is racism, where did it come from, in whose interest did it happen? White people, people who call themselves white, a fiction, have to know that history. And you must be armed with the tools of dealing with it. It affects everything we do. And there are people, there are people who are going around the world teaching people. You need to have it, I would suggest, at this law school, that you have anti-racist training which gets down to the nuts and bolts of how racism works. If you want to stop these plants, you got to understand racism. Why can we put something on? How can we build a plant? How can we build an industry that takes advantage? Oh, I didn't see you coming. I'll let you answer the question. Thank you.
Our panel of distinguished guests continues. This is, so overwhelmed, quite frankly, when we were able to get Mr. John Cummings and Mr. Bryant to fill in for Reverend Edwards and General Honore. Thank you so much for being here, and our director at the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic. But, we have one more speaker, and then we open the floor up for questions and answers, and we go until 2:20. So intentionally, we kept the panelists asked to keep the presentation short. They wanted 10 minutes, and then they really wanted to engage with the audience. So track your questions, and then I'll be here to handle the stack. But our last speaker is Lieutenant General Honore of the United States Army. Their bios are available online also, so I suggest you go there to read the full bio. But this is my synopsis of what I think of General Honore.
Great.
General Honore is one of us. He is a native of Lakeland, Louisiana. He holds numerous higher education degrees and has been honored with 7 doctorate degrees.
Not from Tulane yet, though. I'm just saying. Loyola fessed up, Southern fessed up. I'm just saying.
The lucky general.
But Loyola, you have been. If I recall
That's
my
right, Loyola.
name.
Across the street, I'm just saying.
After Hurricane Katrina and Rita, General Honore led the Department of Defense response in Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, commanding the Joint Task Force Katrina. In a time of chaos, General Honore brought us order and compassion. His famous words, "Put down your guns," reverberated across media outlets. And I would argue that was the turning point of American perception in New Orleans. Residents, not as criminals, but as survivors of a massive disaster. His military service and honors are quite foreign to the civilian perspective, such as mine. But it's difficult not to notice the scale of trauma he has witnessed and the leadership he has portrayed. All told, General Honore served for 37 years as an active in the Army and retired in February 2008. He continues to serve the people of the United States and us here in Louisiana as a civilian, forming the Green Army, an umbrella organization leading the charge to protect the people against harmful pollution by coordinating environmental activism across the state of Louisiana. General Honore.
I'm not going to promise to you like the last 2 people lied and said they're going to be quick. You got to get the stick out. I formed the Green Army in 2012 because of the sinkhole in Bayou Corn. And I was there minding my own business at my house, doing my speaking business, going around the country and making a lot of money. Written 2 books, and here come Bayou Corn, where a group of Cajuns sent me a note and said, "General, we need your help. The sinkholes keep getting bigger. The state's not paying attention. It's been a year. Come see us." And so that next night I saddled up and went to Pierre Park Library and sat down with a group of Cajuns. I mean, these were the authentic lineage back to when they arrived on the Pirogues. All of them Tea Party. They could not get any response from the governor. Getting very little response from the media. And the state agency treated them like they were dumb and stupid. and they were frustrated. And from that operation, we created a public spectacle down in Baton Rouge. We put a law in that year to change if you're required to move because of an event, you have to be paid fair market value for the house, for your home. In that case, they got bamboozled. The guy that represented him was the guy who represented Vita. That's who ended up with the contract to support these people. He never visited them. He got $25 million. He was the defense attorney for him against a company out of Texas, an LLC that's run out of a subdivision called Texas Bryant, who had bought this wellhead from OxyChem. OxyChem that year had given General $90,000 to run for president. So what I'm about to describe to you and what I come to learn from a guy named Willie Fontenot is exceptions and exemptions. And you lawyers better write that shit down. Because that is what distinguishes Louisiana from the rest of the world. Is that we give exceptions and exemptions to the law. The other point I want you to take with it is a permit is nothing more than a permit to pollute. If you're not polluting, you don't need a damn permit. Got it? That all a permit is a permit to pollute, and you add that inside of Louisiana law. Where we have the other topic you need to know, lawyers, is regulatory capture. Regulatory capture is what happened in St. James Parish, where you can get a federal judge appointed by President Reagan to say no to the people that he is sworn to protect. Technicalities that he wants to enforce. The same guy said no to same-sex marriage. He is still practicing law. Now, you lawyers can't say that because y'all scared the hell of judges and that you might go before them one day. The good news is that they do die. And there's an equal number of good ones and bad ones that die every year. And I don't mean no ill will, but it does happen. They're not there forever, which means you got to go out and study and replace this. I operate a volunteer army. 2 months later, we created the Green Army at Xavier University at a meeting, a network for people who were interested in environmental justice and social justice. That next legislation session, we got 3 laws to the books. I do understand this about the Constitution as a military officer. If you're going to change things, you got to change the law. In Louisiana, we are one of the few states you can't change the law unless you go through a legislative committee of about 16 people that's appointed by the majority leader. Whoever that is, they'd say who go on that committee. The committee inside of natural resources, which most of our bills go through, is regulatory captured. Over half of them are lawyers who work for the oil and gas industry when they're not in session. So regulatory capture, again, is what the industry control the agencies, which brings out a big part of why we've got to address this through law. This last year, Mr. Cummings mentioned a change to the tumor registry. The tumor registry is about as close to a communist operation as ever seen. It's run out of LSU Public Health. And it's nothing against that university. But the way the legislature set up the tumor registry was as a result of a legal action. They said we have to have somebody watching and taking data. But the way they take data is in populations over 16,000. And most of our parishes don't have 16,000 people in them, if you wanted to count. That created a problem. So we created that law to change it that will get to that data level you were talking. We've got 8 bills in session this year. I talked with you about it. It's about abandoned oil fields. It's about the Southern Hill Aquifer in Baton Rouge. It's about fence line air monitoring, which last year we had a bill in that was about to go through committee, and the committee chairman asked the DEQ Secretary Chuck Carl Brown, do you need this bill? He leaned over into me and said, we don't need this bill. And I went to the government and we went to war over this. Because I do have access to this government. The last governor wouldn't talk to us. We had, the next month he sent Chuck Carl Brown to St. Rose, Louisiana, next to the Destrehan Plantation. That is deep in my lineage because I'm a descendant of a slave from Destrehan Plantation. And here we've got a company, IMMT and Shell Corporation, who, through regulatory capture, told DEQ to let them continue to operate. DEQ promised a year ago to put air monitoring in St. Rose. It hasn't been done yet. This Monday, DEQ, because we got another bill coming forward on air monitoring, called the citizens of St. Rose and said, where do you want to put the air monitor? Ask the citizens. That's like asking the drunks where you want to put the radar. That's how stupid they think we are. We've got to change the law. We're moving that bill forward in spite of some pushback from the governor's people because they want DEQ to cooperate with the people. This is not working well. We don't have a good marriage with DEQ. We got a guy that's a 20-year Exxon retiree with a PhD from Southern University in philosophy, and he's running that, and he's a former executive in the industry. Volunteers. Let me tell you, I'm proud of my volunteers. Volunteers don't give a damn. As a result of that Shell operation in St. Rose, I lost a board job, making $100,000 a year on this board in Atlanta. Shell Corporation found out I was working with the people in St. Rose. They called that company in Atlanta and said, hey, we will not give you any contingency contracts if that general is working with the people in St. Rose. So it was a quick decision. We got 7,000 people in the company. The company, rest of the board members said, Russell, what do you want to do? I said, well, I'll walk. I walked. I kept my mouth shut. Why? Because I don't give a damn. I'm a volunteer. We still don't have air monitoring in St. Rose. We're moving that bill forward. When I call for you, I'm going to need you. Tulane, I need y'all to show up. We need to have air monitoring. When it's designated by the DEQ, we put triggers in the bill. The people of Louisiana deserve that. Shell in Norco just been required to put air monitoring in. We've been trying to get it for the inception of this fight. They won't do it. We need you to be involved. We need you to participate. And this is about fighting pollution. The war is climate change. You win a war through winning battles. When he win that battle, we'll start solving this problem. Until we solve pollution, we're not going to solve this. Everybody in here is a little part of this act. I drive a car and get 15 miles a gallon. The engineering department, go develop a damn engine where we don't need fossil fuel. That's the kind of stuff we got to do. But we got to fight pollution because the impact is on the poor and the people that can't move. And it's impact on their health. A line from the movie Scarface. When President of Cuba was talking to Scarface, said, Batista, he said, look, I've got 20,000 men in uniform that are armed. We can handle these peasants and rebels. And Scarface looked at that. That is not shit, man. You got damn soldiers that you paid little money. Those some bitches are volunteers. They don't give a damn. God bless you.
So, would it be all right, may I invite sort of our speakers to come up, because I think people are going to want to ask you questions, so we lined up these 4 chairs and you can come up so they can all see you at the same time at once.
We got it, man.
chairs over
We got it,
there.
man.
Thank you.
There you go. There you go, Doc.
Lisa, you have that extra towel.
Okay, why don't you go on that side? There we have a white person on one side and a colored person on the other. Go over there, yeah. White people on one side. It's sensitive to them kind of things.
Let me tell you about this gentleman.
They're like self-segregated, and I was like, oh God.
Was it Whitey's?
Huh?
The bar in the French Quarter, Whitey's?
I don't remember.
Well, he shows up with a Jeep, man, and some of the guys in the French Quarter, and I'm sure most of you men would be the same, they decided not to leave because of the hurricane and were staying in Florida. And so this man is a great politician, he drives around, he's got guys with machine guns and asking people, can he do this, that, and the other. Went to Whitey's, and Whitey said he needed another case of scotch. They didn't have any scotch for the guy. Came back the next day and delivered. So. My kind of man.
So again, our speakers, Director of the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic, Professor Lisa Jordan, on your far right here, Lieutenant General Honore, Attorney John Cummings, and Mr. Pat Bryant. So I thought maybe instead, if y'all had one question for each other, if someone in the panel had a question for someone as you were sitting and you were listening, but I want to let you know that you also have the option of asking questions of each other. But I'll open up the floor. Let's take a question. Anyone?
Nowadays, with the corporate control of pretty much everything and the whole 1% issue, the environmental justice issue seems to have expanded beyond just the lowest income, which all of us are rapidly becoming in that group and have not much more power, even if you're white and middle class. You don't really have any power. But anybody speak to that?
Yeah, I will. Because a lot of people, if I may, would think environmental justice went to hell last year in January. It didn't. Obama drug, you know what, on a lot of stuff. And he allowed fracking to get out of control because he was thought to believe that it would help the economy. He let the bankers off the hook. After many of them even took soldiers who were deployed home, he kept none of them accountable. And he allowed oil and gas to go crazy. He allowed a group of people out of Washington and Wall Street to go create Cheniere Energy. None of them had any background in no damn energy. But they put this together and they got FERC and the government to approve the United States to be allowed to start selling oil and gas overseas. Crime, damn shame that we're now selling oil and gas overseas when the idea behind the exploration was to what? Make us energy secure. And what the idiots have done, the stupid idiots have taken natural gas that was selling at a .12, now sell for a .4. How stupid is that? And they built it inside a flood zone. So the last administration had a big part of regulatory capture, even though they did sign some stuff the last 6 months out that made a difference. Executive orders that will immediately kill soon as the new administration came in. But it was no rise. St. Rose happened under Obama watch. He sent it, the EPA director down there. We sent the people of Washington to go testify. Nothing happened. That same year, Shell took over the Jazz Festival.
Yeah.
Took over the Jazz Festival. Now what in the hell this Dutch company that does all this damn pollution has the authority to take over the jazz session? At the same time, Mercedes put their damn name on the Superdome. That's paid for by the people of Louisiana. That's who paid for the Superdome. So this regulatory capture is done by these people with big money that pay these politicians off. And that's what we're up against. But we've got to change the law. Look at the room. Most of the people I deal with are women. When I go to communities, 95% of people involved in environmental justice are women that are making the difference. And we got to teach our kids, and we've got to get involved, because this pollution will kill us, and it's going to kill us all equally. That poison that's coming out of St. James, St. John, it falls into a jet stream. They use engine's powers as a jet engine to push it up in the air. It may not fall in the first 50 feet around the plant, otherwise all the plant work would be dead. They push it away, get in the jet stream, and where it comes down is based on some statistics that what we call a downwind hazard plume. So it could be coming down 10 miles away if it's 90 degrees. If it's 40 degrees, it could be coming down a half mile away. All that is scientifically based, but our LDEQ allows it to happen. So that's what we're up against, is regulatory capture.
Well, yeah, unless we understand racism, white supremacy, what gives you the right as a white person or as white people to allow the poisoning of a community because it's a community of color? Or what gives you the right to enforce systems where people of color get poor education? Or what gives you the right, as people who call white, to set up a system of job attainment that allows you to get jobs and others to be unemployed? We've got to work on this. That is the key. That is the key to environmental justice and all injustices. We have to unravel for people white supremacy. Where did it come from? It was not alive 600 years ago. Who created it?
I have an idea on that. We believe that at the Whitney that you can't rewrite history, of course, but we think that a lot of the problems we have today can be cured with education. Everything that's been said here is true. But I believe this is long on Cummings and maybe short on correctness. I believe that if we can get 200,000 or 300,000 African Americans through a college, 2 years or 4 years, for 25 years, 30 years, I think we'll have an opportunity to look at equality. I spoke the other day to some young African Americans that just graduated high school, and I said, "You're worried," because I've talked to you, "you're worried that the whites will get everything, that you will not be respected if you get an education." And I pointed out that when someone comes over and asks you, "Raymond, what do you think about this?" that means that you're getting respect. Somebody believes that you know something that they don't. That's why Tennessee, all 2-year colleges are now free, and that should be true here in Louisiana, because education is the only way out. We started a school 16 years ago. My sister and a Catholic priest. It's called Good Shepherd. I want you to Google it. At that time, we believed that at one African American high school, only 35% of the freshman class graduated from that school. School boards should have a retention program so that a 16-year-old kid who just learned not to suck his thumb can make a decision that he doesn't want to have any more education, he wants to drop out. If we have to convince, I'll give you an example. Good Shepherd started 14 years ago. Those kids were taken from the same areas, the same families that high school had, where there was 65% dropout. And not one dropout at this school. I just saw last May 4 of the first graduates go across the stage and get their college degrees, 3 of them going on to higher education. I'm convinced of that. I'm convinced that when we have to understand where racism came from, or white supremacy, some of it can be attributed to education. Educated people were able to run their plantations, and they dressed like this every day with hats, so they didn't work. They didn't have to do the work. And these people from Africa were brought in, and for 300 years, they did the work. And what was the big fear of the whites? Education. You were prohibited. Excuse me, yes, ma'am.
When you're done, I have questions.
Okay. I just want to know what you meant.
Yeah.
I thought maybe you were pointing out a Republican. What we have to do is to look at and see where it came from and how it is projected. I know how it's projected. I've got that color skin. I work with people who still believe that they have no moral responsibilities. But I want to invite everybody here to come to the witness, my guest. Just let me know. I'll leave a card here, a cell phone number. Come and learn what you don't know. I didn't know it. I didn't know it. I didn't know, for example, when I bought that place, it came with, thanks to General Honore, came with an 8-volume study of the historic nature of that property and what should be, what could not be used for that rayon plant. First, it was interesting. When I bought it, I just put canvas and plastic on it so it wouldn't die. But when I read about the architecture, it was interesting. But when I got to the part about successions, where it passes from one owner to every succession has an inventory, what you die possessed of. And here I was, and I'm looking at a succession. I'm looking at and I realized that the second and most valuable asset on the plantation was human beings.
That's right.
I didn't know that. I was embarrassed, I want to tell you. I was 60-some odd years old. I had everybody in New Orleans fooled that I was a civic leader. I had many degrees. I was a wealthy man. And that, I was just another dumb sucker. And I was embarrassed.
Sure.
So I started to look at that. And I looked at the inventory for my plantation where 101 names, 1860. Reuben, no, Alfred, 24, his job on a plantation. Cooper, he made the barrels that the sugar was shipped out in. Any comment? And then, in either Spanish, French, or American currency, he was valued. He was valued. It's reported to me another inventory, not from ours, where Eve, 29, female. She wasn't a cooper or blacksmith on the plantation. She was a good breeder. I haven't changed since that day. That's the day that I decided this would not be a commercial plantation, and I meant that. Whatever Uncle Sam and the bartender let me keep, I just put into real estate. And I just added it as another addition to a portfolio of valuable properties. But from that day on, I had to learn. Because if I didn't know it, and I thought I was the smartest man on earth, other people with this skin didn't know it, didn't even, and I went back, it was never taught, it's still not taught. I got my 4th grade history book, SLAB is there, that's it. That's a long way of agreeing with everybody.
Thank you. I wanted to, I am housing director at the Lower Ninth Ward Home Ownership Association, where the return rate is still 37%.
I can't hear you, I'm 81 years
Oh,
old.
sorry. So the return rate in the Lower Ninth Ward is only 37%. People don't necessarily know that. But what I wanted to ask about actually is your experience with the Army Corps of Engineers, which obviously Mr. Go was one of the biggest reasons for the devastation, for the fact that 1,000 people died in the Lower Ninth Ward. And now the Army Corps of Engineers is talking about widening the Industrial Canal, which is going to be a project that lasts for 14 years. Basically going to be drilling piles for 14 years, and it's going to cost almost $1 billion. And of course, they've not done an adequate environmental impact statement. They're actually relying on an impact statement from like 1997 or something. And I know that Clinic has been involved with this previously, but I wondered if anybody had any particular insights about the Corps.
The Corps of Engineers want to expand that canal like they want to go to the moon. There are some senators that have told them this is what they want to happen. And there's a lobby group that want that senator to do it.
We know who that senator is?
You got to figure that out. I can tell you how we ended up with Mr. Gold. We had a senator named Boggs who held up the core promotion board and budget until they said yes to Mr. Gold. That senator named she now. She's a dead now, so we talk about it.
Lindsay, not Haley?
The old senator. That's how we ended up with Mr. Gold. All the engineering studies said this won't work. But the generals couldn't get promoted and the Corps couldn't get a budget because one senator can hold the damn projects up. And they hold it until they said yes. They built it because she had constituents that wanted to exercise their privilege to develop that land along Mr. Gold and put their camps where they could go out in their fancy boats and have their fancy parties. The carnival class out of New Orleans. All right, just go right there to Charter Street. That's all their damn addresses. All over in Houston. She did that for her buddies. We end up with Mr. Gold and Katrina come. Everybody said, the Corps engineers, that's the senator behind that want this to happen, and sometimes they'll make the Corps do things so certain companies get to work and do the jobs.
Yes.
Go look at the companies that do the work for the Corps. Okay? One of them had the name Graves. One of them named the Brothers. I forget the name of them. They do the work. They'll create a job so they can get to work. That has no redeeming factors for the people or for the area economy. So why was the Industrial Canal built? Because of World War II. To protect us from German U-boats. There ain't no damn German U-boats still circling around Louisiana. And we're so stupid when they went through Cameron Parish, they put the spoiled dirt on the north side of the canal. It never was a contract for the Corps to maintain that spoiled dirt. Then when Hurricane Rita came, it washed in the Creole in places that the high water had never gone before from the surge. So the Cajuns down there said, you let the levee deteriorate, Corps engineers. Hello, it never was intended to be a levee. It was just a place to put the damn dirt.
Oh, wow.
And then when the tidal surge water came in, it overcapped and brought, the water went north of the Industrial Canal and killed thousands of cattle. So I bring it back to the Corps engineers. They need to be dealing with the Mississippi River and this thing between Chapelai and the Mississippi River.
Right.
And what's going to happen to Homer, who continues to build in the frickin' flood zone.
Right.
Homer and Market City need to be told, stop it.
Yeah.
They keep putting subdivisions in the damn flood zone, then hold a knife to the governor's throat every time we get ready to open the Chapelai Basin. The Chapelai Basin was built on land that they took from my people who settled in North. We had a 1,000-acre farm up there. They took it from them, told them they had to move. They could still have rights to it if they paid the taxes. This was during the Depression. When the hell you get money to pay taxes when now you got to go rent land?
Right.
The government took it. Now it's owned and controlled by landmen like the Wilbur brothers and others, and churches up north own the land in the basin for control that they put oil and gas wells on. They pay little to no taxes. No forestry pay any tax in any year until they take up the trees. How would you like a deal like that? That's what's going on in the basin. And the basin is crisscrossed by these pipelines. That's another story to look at. But the challenge we continue to come back to is regulatory capture. How the companies tell the government what to do. They tell the courts. The fish court judge is a damn joke. It's a damn joke. Why? Because most of the people in now we appointed during the Reagan administration are by Mary Landrieu. I love Mary Landrieu like a sister, but she had all over her feet. And the judges she put in there never worked with environmental justice issues. Never. Never. And we got a law in Louisiana, the state court, that if a decision is made, and Tulane representatives one in Bell River, where the court said no to a permit by a fast. In Louisiana, we have a law that a man appointed by the governor can override a court. Now tell me where in the damn democracy you've ever seen that before. Not just a regular court, the state Supreme Court say no, and this damn guy appointed by the government making $100,000 a year can override a court in Louisiana. Why? Because in the Louisiana legislature put that in Louisiana law.
So we're at 2:20, and I invite you to stay behind and come up and speak to our, meet our speakers. My takeaway, I just like to share, my prerogative as the moderator. These are our fighters on the front lines with community groups, and I just want to make sure. Let's not forget, Lisa Jordan came up here. She talked about access to justice, the fight. That fight. Speak to Lisa Jordan, the timing, the answering, public hearings, restricted venues, and then, these are call to actions, right? That's what we heard from our speakers today. John Cummings told you, form your law group. We're going to take down the plants one by one up and down the Mississippi River. That's your call to action from John Cummings. And very, very, very small call to action from Pat Bryant. You're going to undo racism and white supremacy in this group. And then General Honore, so much. My biggest call to action from General Honore is that you win a war by fighting battles. And he's taking them on one by one right now with his volunteer Green Army. Sign up, come meet the general, learn some more about it. These are your call to actions. Thank you to our speakers.
Of course, you nothing to join.